My name is Henry Sloyan, and I will be presenting with Noah McKouen and Gehman. Our case study was on the cyber attack on TNT Express that affected FedEx and its subsidiaries. I will now be giving a brief case overview. In May of 2016, FedEx acquired TNT Express for $4.9 billion. At the time, this seemed like a great maneuver, as TNT had a large hold over the European market. FedEx was going to use this acquisition to expand further into the European market while combining their air network with TNT's road network. TNT is one of the largest parcel delivery services in the world, bringing in around $7 billion a year, so it seemed like everything about this process would be smooth. It was stated by FedEx executives that the integration process was proceeding smoothly and according to plan. Now, in 2016, there was the start of the first cyber attack. This was called Petya. And Petya was a ransomware that locked people out of their files and cost $300 to unlock them. TNT Express was infected by the NotPetya malware in June of 2017. The reason that this virus was different is because instead of locking people out of their files, it wiped the files completely. Now, this caused the European market and TNT operations to completely halt. They had to resort to manual package handling, and this issue plagued the company for nearly 2 months. FedEx had to pay $300 million in damages as they had no cybersecurity or cyber insurance. This leads to our case, which we'll be talking about what FedEx has to do in order to improve in the future.
There were three main cyber attacks that affected FedEx in this case. The first being the Petya attack of 2016, which was a ransomware that was first detected in 2016, and that ransomware, it attacked Microsoft Windows-based operating systems, and what it would do is affect the master reboot card of the computer, which would force it to shut down. And then when the computer was rebooted, it was hit with this payload, which is a kind of a blocker that it came up with this ransom note, and you had to pay $300 in Bitcoin if you wanted to regain access to your files. It also sought out any other computer that was connected to your same network, and it would do the exact same thing. It would force them to restart, and then it would have this payload where you were forced to pay $300 in Bitcoin, or you wouldn't be able to get your files back. WannaCry was the next cyber attack, and it was ransomware that it was actually the largest ransomware attack to date. It affected 300,000 different computers across 200,000 organizations that were in more than 150 countries. But the next attack, NotPetya, although it didn't affect as many computers, it was financially the largest to date, causing more than 10 billion in damage. But I'll talk more about NotPetya in the next slide, just because of how important it was to this case. So the reason NotPetya was the most detrimental of the three cyber attacks is just because of how damaging it was financially. So originally NotPetya was a Russian cyber attack on Ukraine and their enemies in Ukraine. And what it was designed to do was to infiltrate their the popular accounting software called Medoc, and what it was supposed to do was go through that software and infect any operating system in Ukraine that used that. That was kind of their back door, their way in. And it wasn't supposed to spread worldwide. It was supposed to just destabilize their enemies in Ukraine. However, TNT was acquired by FedEx, as we had mentioned, and they have operations in Ukraine that use that service. So unintentionally, that it was infected with this virus and ultimately affected their operating systems as well. And the reason why NotPetya was also so damaging was because it was a cyber attack, not just ransomware. And what makes it an attack is the fact that they didn't decrypt any of the files that were infected. Once a computer was taken over or infected by NotPetya, those files were wiped. they were completely gone, and there's no way to retrieve them. So if you didn't have a backup, they were gone. That's why it was so damaging to these companies, especially FedEx and TNT. And ultimately, it caused $10 billion worth of damage worldwide among several different companies, not just FedEx and TNT Express.
I will now be talking about the major characteristics of FedEx and TNT Express. So FedEx was founded in 1973 and is headquartered in the United States. TNT was founded in 1946 and is headquartered in Australia. As you can see on the graphic, both companies serve over 200 countries worldwide. The major differences come when you look at the rest of the graphic. So FedEx ships nearly 11.5 million packages a day, while TNT only ships around 1 million. Additionally, FedEx has over 300,000 more employees than TNT Express. Additionally, FedEx has 70,000 more vehicles, and TNT has no airplanes, while FedEx has 657 worldwide. Previously, the two companies had been competitors, but FedEx acquired TNT for $4.9 billion. Now, TNT, since it has been around since 1946, has strength in recognizability in Europe. Their established road network allows them to have great success in this region. Now, FedEx, having been a previous competitor, decided that buying out TNT Express would allow them to have an even greater share in the European market. FedEx predominantly operates in North America, but expanding into Europe was a goal of theirs for a long time. Due to the rise of e-commerce, it became essential for goods and products to be shipped through the air. Now, because FedEx has 657 aircrafts, combining that with TNT's strength in road network allows them to become the #1 international player for delivery and parcel delivery. Now, because of this acquisition, this horizontal integration allows FedEx to become one of the world's largest companies, and the addition of TNT will allow them to spread their reach across the world. After listening to this information, why do you think FedEx would want to acquire TNT Express?
That's a great question, Henry, and we would love to hear what you guys think about why FedEx would want to acquire TNT Express. I'm going to discuss FedEx's actual reasons and motives behind the acquisition. In May 2016, FedEx acquired a 100% stake in TNT Express for $4.9 billion. This was a horizontal acquisition because it involved two firms competing in the same industry, and the motives of this acquisition were purely synergistic. This essentially means that FedEx wanted to acquire TNT to achieve something that they could not do on their own. As we already know, TNT was a far smaller company than FedEx, but they had something that FedEx didn't. The company was founded in 1946, and over time they managed to develop an international shipping network with a particularly well-established network and market share in Europe. However, they lacked the superior financial, physical, and technological resources that allowed for FedEx to provide superior shipping speeds and rates that we know. Before the acquisition, FedEx lacked a strong presence in the European market, and with the combined resources from them and TNT, FedEx felt that they could establish a shipping network throughout Europe and they could disrupt the international competition. From a resource-based view, the acquisition of TNT allows for the two companies to leverage their superior and complementary resources. Specifically regarding the superior resources, TNT had a well-established road system throughout Europe, and FedEx had superior air services, capital, and service, being the larger company. With the acquisition, FedEx is able to take advantage of these resources and provide faster shipping to customers within all the networks that TNT had established throughout the world, specifically the European market. From an industry-based view, the acquisition of TNT allowed for FedEx to enter a new international market and increase their international presence and globalization strategy. This contributed to their globalization strategy and provided them with a greater market share and wider customer base throughout Europe and all the other countries that TNT operated in. After FedEx acquired TNT for $4.9 billion, they got to work on the integration. They wanted to ensure that the integration process went smoothly and was cost effective. The first step in the integration process was to maintain the TNT brand name through all the integrations and ensure consistent customer experience. Next, they sought to change certain systems and infrastructure so the two companies could work well together. FedEx took this unique approach because they did not want to completely restructure the TNT brand. The executives clearly understood the liability of foreignness and the potential downside to restructuring the TNT organization and taking away its name. As we know, customers can discriminate against foreign firms, and in the shipping industry, a sense of reliability and trust is essential for companies like FedEx to get and retain their customers. Some ways FedEx maintained the TNT brand was by keeping tracking shipping tools and customer interface the same way it was. Think about it like this. If you operate a business in one of the countries that TNT operates in, like the Netherlands, and you have relied on their service to ship your products for years, and then all of a sudden they change their name to FedEx, would you trust a new foreign company that you know nothing about to ship your products the same way? Personally, I don't think I would, and this is why FedEx decided to maintain the TNT brand. Essentially, even though they now owned 100% of TNT, they sought to work together instead of completely take over because they felt that it was the best way to make the acquisition successful. FedEx integrated the systems and infrastructure of each company in a way that the two brands could work together under the same names. The first thing that they implemented was cross-scan technology. This was a system that allowed for FedEx packages to be processed in the TNT system and vice versa. This basically allowed for the two brands to ship each other's packages in one combined network. They did this by creating co-branded stations, where you would see both FedEx and TNT vehicles and workers. For example, in this picture on the right, you can see that one FedEx worker and one TNT worker are seen delivering different packages in the same network. This method proved to be effective, and it was estimated that the co-branded stations allowed for shipping speeds to be faster in 40% of the shipping lanes throughout the TNT network. Another area that the systems were integrated was their websites and inquiry systems, which allowed for each company to manage and coordinate each other's inquiries, depending on the area of service. For example, if you go to the TNT website and you change your location to America or wherever you are, it will redirect you to the FedEx website. But if you're in the Netherlands, or if you're a service somewhere where TNT delivers and you go to their website, they're going to give you all the TNT services as you already had them. So you can still ship, track, and order different packages. The last main area that they integrated, and in my opinion the most effective, was their air operations. To do this, they connected the air hubs and created new flight patterns that would allow for each company's network to extend their reach into each other's. FedEx's overall integration strategy was to slowly connect the two companies' systems and infrastructures one step at a time, while remaining transparent with companies and customers until they eventually created one fully integrated global shipping service that can be trusted and desirable for everyone in its new markets. FedEx executives were very optimistic about the long-term success of the TNT acquisition, and they assured shareholders that their initial integrations as well as the acquisition as a whole were running very smoothly. However, financial losses cannot be hidden by public companies like FedEx, and they were forced to address shareholders when they reported a net loss of $70 million in the fourth quarter of 2016. Although FedEx did not rush the integration process, it was still very costly as they created the combined global shipping network with TNT. And certainly, the acquisition as a whole came with a number of problems. TNT also experienced a decrease in revenue and operational efficiency during the integration process because it was such a large-scale endeavor for a company like TNT, who didn't have the infrastructure to support their previously announced turnaround strategy, as well as all these operational changes and integration activities. FedEx knew that this process would come with challenges, and they were still confident in the company's long-term success after these minor financial setbacks. However, the biggest problem of the acquisition proved to be the cyber attacks that completely blindsided the company. During the integration stage, FedEx made the decision to not integrate the key TNT technological systems with its own, like its shipping and tracking system, as well as its user interface, which I discussed previously. They wanted to keep the brand name the same, but by not changing these systems, they left a backdoor for the cyber attacks that occurred. Due to a lack of due diligence from the FedEx team, they spent over $400 million in recoveries, and the integration activities for both companies were slowed after the attacks. Overall, the complete process and cyber attack recoveries cost FedEx over $1.5 billion, and it was a major hit to the company. The cross-border acquisition of TNT was one of the largest acquisitions and financial investments in company history to date for FedEx. It was a key element in the company's globalization strategy to establish a greater presence within the European shipping market and the international market as a whole. After facing a number of unpredictable problems with the integration process and the very costly cyber attacks, FedEx executives remained optimistic about the acquisition's long-term benefits. At the time, the general public and shareholders were very skeptical about the company's long-term success and future. FedEx CEO and President Frederick Smith addressed the public in a company statement where he said, "The acquisition of TNT Express capped a historic year of significant accomplishments that benefited shareholders, team members, and customers, and positions FedEx for long-term profitable growth." After hearing the previous statement from FedEx CEO Frederick Smith, we have a quick question for you guys. Why do you think FedEx executives remain so optimistic about the company's future, despite facing all these problems with the acquisition? Let's start by taking a look at the GIF on the right side of the screen. The blue dots are the FedEx stations that existed in Europe before the TNT acquisition, and the orange dots are the TNT stations. If the rest of the acquisition goes smoothly, the two networks will be fully integrated, and FedEx will control all of the stations. This new infrastructure will allow them to access TNT's previous market share and become a dominant shipping presence in Europe. When you account for this integration on an international scale to the other countries TNT had stations in, FedEx will have a much larger international presence just from this acquisition alone. With the co-branded stations and connected air hubs, FedEx is able to provide shipping faster at cheaper prices than the majority of its international competition. As FedEx continues to acquire and partner with other key brands as a part of its globalization strategy, it can learn from the flaws in its acquisition with TNT and expand its market share and grow its customer base throughout the world. For a quick summarization, the main reasons that FedEx executives remained optimistic after the acquisition was to access TNT's European market share, to have a greater international presence, a wider consumer base, and faster shipping times and service, and superior service, which allows for more satisfied customers.
So now that we've heard about these cyber attacks and how they've affected FedEx and other companies around the world, the question is, how do you prepare for the next cyber attack? Do companies need to do a better job preparing? Does the government need to do a better job of keeping foreign hackers out? Or can you even prevent a cyber attack like this from happening? So in the next slide, we have a video clip from Andy Greenberg, who is a technology analyst for the Wired magazine, and he answered this question pretty well in his interview with CBS News.
we prevent another one of these? Because I don't think we've seen that guarantee from the U.S. government. And the question is, what comes next? How do we prevent another one of these? Because I don't think we've seen that guarantee from the U.S. government or from governments around the world. Are you confident that we're prepared for the next one?
I don't think we really can be prepared to prevent the next one of these. This was a cyber war attack. This was Russian military intelligence hackers unleashing a piece of malware using zero-day vulnerabilities we haven't patched in our systems that we maybe can't patch. So it spreads unintentionally to the rest of the world. It was meant to be a cyber war attack on their enemies in Ukraine. So, it's very difficult to prevent attacks from these kind of ultra-sophisticated hackers. What we need to do is first send a message to countries like Russia that this is unacceptable, this kind of reckless attack can't happen again. And then we need to be prepared to kind of recover quickly from these massive worms that spread around the world.
So from FedEx's perspective, how did they prepare for a cyber attack? So in 2003, they implemented the Code of Business Conduct and Ethics, which is their rule book and guidelines to conducting business safely. In that rule book, they require all computers to be protected and to be used properly. So that discourages the unsafe transmission of data files, and it also ensures that the people who are accessing the data are the people that should be, and it doesn't get in the hands of those who don't need to be seeing it. However, that Code of Business Conduct and Ethics book that they have was not updated until 2016. So that long duration of time allowed hackers to get the step up on FedEx because they were leaving back doors open. They weren't really enforcing these rules. The rule book wasn't as effective as it could have been. Something else they did later was form an Information Technology Oversight Committee. This is a 12-man committee, and their job really is to review major information technology related projects and technology architecture decisions. So they're involved with anything IT. And so they advise the board of directors on IT related matters, and they also advise the company's senior IT management team.
I will now be moving on to talk about culture and ethics surrounding this case. After investigations by the Central Intelligence Agency and intelligence agencies in other countries, it was concluded that Russia was behind this cyber attack. The 2017 NotPetya virus is one of the most devastating cyber attacks of all time. Companies that had nothing to do with the conflict were also affected by this virus. Even though Russia intended this attack to devastate Ukrainian infrastructure, companies that had nothing to do with the conflict between Russia and Ukraine were inflicted as well. So companies like Mondelez and Maersk saw huge setbacks in their shipping and handling division, and they were set back months at a time. And TNT Express was predominantly based in Ukraine at the time. So when the virus hit, that was the main area that was affected. And as soon as TNT Express was hit, their parent company, FedEx, was immediately affected. Since TNT Express typically brings in around $7 billion a year, this was being taken away from FedEx's profits and revenue after they purchased TNT Express. And TNT Express was not able to fully function until nearly a year after the attack. Even though customers were assured that their orders would be fulfilled in a timely manner even after this attack, TNT Express had extreme difficulty shipping and handling divisions. Each package had to be manually inspected before heading out for shipment, as the computer could no longer do it due to the cyber attack. This caused customers to defect from TNT Express and move on to different companies that provided a faster delivery. The efficiency of this company was severely inhibited, and it took months for everything to go back to normal. While the United States and United Kingdom condemned the actions of Russia, there was nothing actually done about it. This could potentially lead to conflict later on if Russia carries on with these kinds of cyber attacks. Although sanctions have been put in place, there is nothing preventing Russia from conducting another one of these cyber attacks. Before the 2017 NotPetya virus hit, FedEx had taken measures to update its Uniform Business Code of Conduct and Ethics for FedEx and its subsidiaries. This policy stated that proper measures should be taken to prevent compliance risks, including computer software and office equipment. Even though viruses such as Petya and WannaCry had been released, it was impossible to prevent and predict the scale of NotPetya. NotPetya devastated the computers, and unlike the ransomware that had been seen in the year before, NotPetya completely wiped files and prevented users from accessing their computer at all. FedEx released statements after this attack saying that the attack would have a financial impact. However, after these statements were released, it is speculated that FedEx covered up the extent to which the company was affected. At first, the executive said that they would pay around $300 million restoring everything that NotPetya had damaged. This included the TNT Express location, but after further investigation, it was found that the servers for the shipping and handling division of TNT Express were so damaged that it could lead to permanent damage. So the fact that TNT Express had to almost completely shut down their operations and resort to manual shipping and handling left FedEx in shambles. This was very hard for the company to recover, and in the first quarterly earnings following the attack, their stock price dropped 4.5% in 1 week. Prior to this attack, or prior to the release of these quarterly earnings, FedEx executives sold millions of dollars worth of their shares and profited greatly. The shareholders of FedEx were upset with these executives because they were not informed of the quarterly earnings until they were actually released. So while the executives profited and made tens of millions of dollars off of it, shareholders did not make anything. Following the release of these quarterly earnings, shareholders filed a lawsuit in 2019, which Noah will go into more. So essentially, FedEx's Code of Conduct and Business Ethics was updated, but even with these new updates, NotPetya devastated the company's infrastructure and left TNT Express to fight for itself for the next year. I will now be talking about Black Swan events. So a Black Swan event, or the Black Swan theory, is a metaphor that describes an event that is not predicted, has a major effect, and seems obvious in hindsight. So in this case, the NotPetya attack was a Black Swan event. The damage and scale of this event could not have been prevented or predicted. So there were previous cyber attacks even in the same year, but the NotPetya attack was much more severe and actually erased computers' memories and all of their files. So the WannaCry and Petya viruses, they locked the files, but you could unlock them by paying a ransom. So what NotPetya was actually an act of war against Ukraine. So Russian hackers of the GRU, military intelligence agency in Russia, they created this virus to devastate Ukrainian infrastructure. And this happened to, affect other companies like FedEx, Mondelez International, and other major players. So this amassed $10 billion in damages, but looking back, it's easy to say, there were other cyber attacks like WannaCry and Petya, so it could have been prevented using proper techniques. But in reality, a cyber attack of this scale is extremely rare, and it is actually considered the largest and most effective virus of all time. It completely wiped computers at major worldwide companies, and obviously FedEx was heavily impacted because of their recent purchase of their subsidiary TNT.
So some of the key issues in this case were the political and legal issues. In this slide, I'm going to be focusing on the political issues. And the fact of the matter is that these political tensions that rose from this NotPetya attack really affected the United States as a whole and not just FedEx and TNT Express. So NotPetya was a Russian attack on Ukraine, which was deemed an act of war. And the fact that the United States got roped into this act of war really put the spotlight on the U.S. government, because as a world-renowned powerhouse, other countries look to the U.S. and look to them as that powerhouse, and what are they going to do to respond to that? And the answer was we didn't. The president was put in the spotlight to respond to it, and we didn't have a clear, immediate response, which left the door open for other countries to do the same thing, because they saw that there were no deterrents put in place, there were no consequences, and so why not try? And so this let the door open for Iran, who not too long after this attack attempted to hack Facebook. And so we were going to continue to see this over and over again, these countries trying to invade the United States cyberspace because there were no consequences for Russia. And so what this did was cause a lot of political uncertainty. And the people in the United States weren't sure if we were going to set these boundaries for Russia. And the businessmen in the United States, they were concerned because they didn't know if they invested in a company in the United States, if their money was safe from hackers, if they were going to get it back or not, or if the government was even going to protect them from that. So that caused a lot of uncertainty, and the government really didn't do its job there to set those immediate boundaries. And it wasn't until a year after where the United States Treasury imposed some additional sanctions because of the accumulation of things on Russia. It was between the NotPetya attack and also with them tampering with the 2016 elections. They kind of combined all that together and then used that as their fuel to sanction Russia further. But because they didn't set immediate responses just for the cyber attack, there was a lot of political uncertainty about that. Lost all operational capabilities, and soon after FedEx came out in a statement saying that all of their operational abilities were fully restored. However, companies that use TNT Express were still experiencing delays of up to 25 days. So the members of the class action, they claimed that the only reason they came out with that statement saying everything was fully restored was because they didn't want to lose their longtime valued customers. Therefore, they just came out with this statement saying everything was back to normal, although they were still experiencing those delays, so obviously it wasn't true. And their misleading statements about integration led investors also to buy stock at artificially inflated prices, because had FedEx been transparent with the public and with their investors about the struggles that they were encountering with TNT, then the stock prices wouldn't have been as high as they were. Therefore, those investors who bought at those high prices wouldn't have experienced the damage and the loss that they did. But in the face of all these allegations, FedEx came out with a statement saying that they intend to vigorously defend themselves against these allegations and will respond accordingly. And so what they did was they did get out in front of it, and they told the public that they were experiencing problems, but it just wasn't to the degree that they actually were experiencing those problems for. And that came out when they released their first fiscal quarter results the following year in 2018, when they didn't come anywhere near to their financial goals that they anticipated. And not only did they not hit their first quarter goals, they also were projected to not even hit their improvement goals by 2020 after acquiring TNT. So this kind of furthered the members of the class action's case, saying that they were misleading their investors and that they weren't even going to hit their operational targets financially. So this looked pretty bad for FedEx, because the world was watching this case, because it was one of the first cyber attack, or one of the largest cyber attacks. And so this drew a negative light to FedEx, and they knew that they had to do something to win the public back. And so what they did was stand by TNT, saying that that everything was going to go back to normal. No data was lost, only operations were slowed. And then in 2019, they ended up winning this case, and it was dismissed after the judge determined that FedEx did or defended themselves to the best of their ability and informed the public to the best of their ability of what was going on, while still trying to toe that line of keeping customers, to make sure they don't lose all of their customers, and trying to be as truthful as possible. Because if they were too transparent, they think they would have lost business, and the judge understood that. Whereas if they weren't transparent enough, then it would have broken some laws, where I think the judge determined they towed that line just perfectly in the middle. So something that FedEx was really concerned about was the long-lasting effects that it was going to have on their company. So some things that they had to deal with were permanent customer loss. Since they lost the trust in some of their customers for long delays, or the fact that they even got hacked in the first place, that caused some customers to not want to come back and not return to their business permanently, which will result in long-term revenue loss. Something that they did to try to mitigate that was put cost incentives into place to attract new customers and to retain the old ones that were thinking about leaving. And what that's going to do is also reduce their total revenue, because now they have to discount prices or give reimbursements when previously they wouldn't have had to. Another long-lasting effect this is going to have on FedEx is the reputational damage, which might be the most important, because when you hear FedEx, you think of shipping and transportation, and that's what they want you to think. But now maybe some people hear FedEx and think of cyber attacks, or that they're not a stable company. Maybe because of that last lawsuit, maybe they're not a transparent company. And so that's a really damaging image to have as the face of your company. And so that's something that they need to mitigate as well, by gaining trust back from their old customers and being able to attract new customers. Another thing that they're concerned about, or that could be an effect, are potential government regulation changes. Since we talked about the U.S. not responding immediately or even having great cyber protection right now, that might change in the future. I know right now the government's working on a program called Shields Up, which is kind of a movement to protect businesses from these cyber attacks. And it's kind of in the works right now, but later on, as it goes further down or comes closer to the completion process, that might have an impact on their business, or that might have to add extra steps, which might cost them more money to operate in other countries and even here in the U.S. In this diagram, I put this on the slide as well to show that the stock dropped 4.5% in just 1 week after the attacks, which caused a sudden shockwave throughout FedEx, because they were concerned that it was going to continue to drop over the years. And that was one of the main questions, was, is the stock price going to continue to drop, or are we going to recover from this? And what we've seen so far is that their stock prices have gone back to normal. They took a hit in 2017 because of the attack, but they've been able to regain the trust of their investors pretty well, because their stock prices have rose significantly. Obviously taking a large hit due to COVID in 2020. That was their biggest loss, because of all the international shipping they were doing, caused a lot of concerns as well. But in regards to the NotPetya attack, they did recover financially from that in regards to their stock price. Something that really financially impacted FedEx during these cyber attacks was the fact that they didn't have any cyber insurance. So I recommend going forward that FedEx should look into cyber insurance and find a policy that is able to protect them most of the time. Because for NotPetya, since that was considered an act of war, cyber insurance doesn't cover acts of war, as we saw with the company Maersk, as they were insured and they went to their insurance company after the attack and they were denied reimbursement because they're not responsible for acts of war. So going forward, I think it's very important for FedEx to find an insurer that's willing to find a middle ground with them, somewhere in between covering it all and getting nothing. I think that being able to find a middle ground with an insurance company is going to be key, so they don't have to incur the full cost if this were to happen again. And then going into cybersecurity, I think FedEx is going to have to really beef up their investments in the cybersecurity realm in order to stay on top of these hackers, because these hackers aren't going to stop ever. And so FedEx needs to constantly be a step ahead, whether that's working with other companies or maybe even the United States beefing up their cybersecurity realm, just to make sure that companies within the U.S. aren't getting hacked into. But FedEx can't control what the U.S. government does, so on their front, they need to make sure that they're protected as best as they can be by investing in their own security systems, making sure they're up to date, and that they don't have any flaws within their own system.
To prevent the problems that came along specifically within the acquisition of TNT, my main recommendation would have been that FedEx enter a strategic alliance before rushing into the acquisition. This is because over 70% of new acquisitions are known to fail, and cross-border acquisitions bring on even more problems. Basically, FedEx took a huge risk by immediately acquiring TNT without any form of strategic alliance. The company's integration strategy did turn out to be effective for the most part, but they missed some minor flaws that cost them millions of dollars. Had FedEx entered into its strategic alliance before investing billions into TNT, they could have had time to develop a better integration strategy and catch these flaws before they even happened. A non-equity based strategic alliance in specific could have allowed the FedEx team to get a better look at TNT's strategic and organizational aspects before taking on any full liability or financial responsibility. FedEx did the right thing to not rebrand the TNT company name, as it could have caused uncertainty or unreliability concerns in the foreign market that TNT established. However, one thing FedEx should have changed was the operational structure of TNT's shipping technology. The failure to switch the systems allowed hackers to enter a backdoor in the TNT software and caused significant financial and operational setbacks with the cyber attacks. We feel that this is because FedEx rushed the acquisition process and did not take the due diligence that was required. Had FedEx entered a strategic alliance with TNT before the acquisition, they would have had more time to understand the TNT systems and find the flaws that ended up costing them millions of dollars.
FedEx is one of the most well-known brands in the entire world. It is known for its high-quality service and speedy delivery times. In order to keep this up in the future, they must be transparent with shareholders, they must update their code of conduct, and improve their cybersecurity. In the first place, FedEx received a lot of backlash following the cyber attack of NotPetya in 2017. Shareholders became extremely frustrated when they found that executives were selling off their stocks and profiting with millions of dollars. These shareholders did not realize that FedEx was losing money until the first quarter earnings were released in 2017. Now, shareholders had a right to be upset and they filed a lawsuit. So in the future, to avoid lawsuits or any kind of legal action, FedEx must make sure to treat their shareholders as equals in the company, as they have a stake. Now, next, with the code of conduct that FedEx has in place right now, it is effective, but it did not prevent the attack of NotPetya in 2017. In order to improve this system, I think it would be best if they have regular seminars teaching their employees and other people in the company how to encrypt their computers so that they are not able to be accessed by malware. And this is simple. You could simply just not click on links that come from outside of the company and make sure that you have high quality passwords that are not easy to breach. Now, this goes into my next point, which is cybersecurity. Now, the rise of e-commerce and online shopping has created a whole new industry. And FedEx, because of their large aircraft fleet, they're able to transport goods from one country to another quickly and efficiently. So in order to make sure that these online orders are fulfilled in a timely manner, they have to make sure that their cybersecurity is of the utmost importance in the company. For example, in the shipping and handling ports, in order to track all these packages that are coming in and out of the facilities, they must make sure that the systems they are using are up to date and not easy to breach. So in the NotPetya attacks, the shipping and handling division of TNT Express was easily infiltrated because of people downloading this malware onto their computer inadvertently, and this ended up costing the company hundreds of millions of dollars. So in the future, it is important that FedEx maintains relationships with their shareholders, updates their code of conduct, and improves their cybersecurity overall.
The acquisition of TNT Express was very historic for FedEx. This was one of the largest acquisitions as well as financial investments in company history. Although the 2017 cyber attacks as well as integration problems ended up being costly for the company, they managed to get through these problems and stay optimistic through the hard times. Today, they offer the largest air express network in the world, as well as an unmatched European road network. With their combined efforts, they offer an expanded global offer that combines the power of both companies. The company remains optimistic now more than ever because the acquisition with TNT is almost fully integrated, and the executive team at FedEx can apply what they have learned as they acquire and partner with more companies to expand their globalization efforts in the future.